Hello, everybody. My name is Nick. If you're seeing this, this is my first long-form YouTube video. So if you've never kind of watched me in the past, I do philosophy videos on TikTok, Instagram, etc. I've had a lot of kind of questions about long form. Will you do them? When? Etc. I've had that question a lot, and this will be the first video. So I want to kind of get straight into things, what this video is going to be about. I was kind of thinking about, getting a whiteboard, talking about philosophy, etc., but I wanted to start with Plato. I think that is a great first, a first starting point with philosophy. And I wanted to kind of combine something unique, something that maybe hasn't been done before. And I thought, hey, why not use Minecraft? So how we'll be doing it, this will be a kind of a long video, probably 45 minutes, maybe an hour. We'll see how much time we have. There's a lot to cover. We're going to be really digging into Plato himself, and in the future videos, we're going to talk about his most famous book, The Republic. We'll kind of walk through each of the chapters together, all the different concepts, and you'll learn a lot, and you'll really gain to appreciate his philosophy a lot. So we'll create the first world. I'm going to try my best to kind of combine playing and talking. So let's, without further ado, let's call it Philosophy World. I already tried filming this and I forgot to record. I filmed for maybe 45 minutes and then I realized, hey, I did not hit record. I'm recording separately the audio and the game, so this is the first time. So we'll see how this goes. If it's good, if it's not, who knows? But we'll go on easy because last time we were getting our ass kicked. So we'll get straight into things. With Plato, I'm sure you've maybe heard Plato in the past, or Aristotle, some of the most influential philosophers really ever, especially in Western philosophy. But before we really get into Plato's thoughts, I wanted to kind of give an idea of why he's even worth investing into or putting some time into understanding him. And while we do that, we're going to try to figure out, I think what we'll do is we'll try to get some wood. We'll try to get a place to build a home, and then I think we'll wrap up from there. So we'll probably get to 45 minutes maybe. We'll see. So Plato obviously is a person of great historical significance, and he's also someone that's been pretty relevant and has remained relevant, whether it's political, educational, or ethical. We're still having debates about leadership, about truth, about expertise, democracy, about authority. And these all kind of trace the roots back to issues that Plato was also kind of dealing with nearly 2,000 years ago. So, when people argue about whether leaders should be chosen by the popular vote or based on qualifications, when people debate whether the people ourselves, if we know what is best for ourselves, whether truth exists, objectively, or if everything is kind of just an opinion, is it subjective? These are all really arguments within Plato's terrain that he mapped out for us. And they really continue within, times of turmoil, especially even now. Times are, I would say, tumultuous to say the least. But understanding Plato can give a bit more insight into all these problems we talk about. He doesn't provide comforting answers, but he does ask us some difficult questions that kind of make us light up in the sense of thinking about things. So this kind of leads me to really the second thing I want to discuss right off the bat. At least philosophy, in the way that Plato practiced, wasn't really just nonsense, abstract stuff. So Plato, philosophy for him, is practical because it concerns with the conditions under which people live, under people making decisions, how they act. How do we determine what is true? Who do we trust? Who do we listen to and why? And, why do the masses, the people, why do we behave as a group in the manner that we do? Why also, lastly, do intelligent societies, people with really smart individuals controlling, make self-destructive decisions? So those are all really great questions, obviously, and they touch on psychology, on politics, and morality. But Plato, he wants to understand what influences a human soul and how these individual souls influence a collective society, what he calls a city-state. Oh, crap. These guys attack? No. Okay, we're good. We do need some food. Let's see. Hold on. Let me just get these chickens first. Oh my gosh. There we go. Last time I filmed, we kind of took a while to get food, and that became quite a big problem. I think biggest priority right now is just building a base, because, yeah, it was not a good time last time. So this is why philosophy was pretty significant in Athens. Ideas really directly influenced laws. They justified wars. They determined, who lived, who died. Plato, to some, is kind of controversial, sometimes labeled anti-democratic. Sometimes, you can see in respects to that can be reasonable to justify. But you also kind of have to understand what that label actually means. He was reacting to a particular historical experience, what was a direct democracy. So, to kind of give a bit of context, in the States, it's a constitutional republic. So when you vote for representatives who then vote to pass legislation. Canada, I believe, constitutional monarchy it's called. Kind of the same thing, but very different from direct democracy, which is what Athens had. So they, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but they would basically, the citizens themselves would vote directly on laws. So direct democracy, the problem with it, which we'll talk about, was in terms of persuasion. So persuading people was really the objective, rather than what Plato would argue the real goal is understanding the truth. And, public opinion would shift pretty dramatically from all these things. With rhetoric, so the ability to obviously use language to your advantage, fear, ambition. And Plato also witnessed the execution of his teacher, Socrates. So this was all very integral to Plato. Plato sometimes is often called the utopian thinker. So someone who envisioned unachievable, unrealistic forms of government. The Greek word was kallipolis. So he was conducting thought experiments as well, right? So he's asking the question of what would occur if we structured a society upon knowledge rather than, popularity. If we relied on education rather than persuasion. If we focused on virtue rather than just seeking power. So what's important is the question that kind of compels us to ask ourselves. What actually makes a person qualified to govern? And I think this is why Plato sometimes is misunderstood or misinterpreted. Many people might leap to conclusions regarding, what Plato believed in without really understanding what problem he believed he was attempting to solve. So this first episode, and I think I won't have enough time to kind of fit it all into one video, is not really to summarize Plato's ideas. I also don't really want to rush through any concepts. A lot of the concepts we'll talk about will be later in the chapters of the Republic we'll talk about. I think, for these videos, in terms of an overview of Plato, it's more building context to really know what the world Plato lived in, the pressures that led to the formation of certain questions he asked. Once you kind of understand the context, his ideas don't seem so arbitrary. They make sense why he's asking these things. And as we continue these videos, there's going to be three main themes that will emerge repeatedly. So the first is the theme of democracy. So in this kind of scope, seeing it as more of a fragile social structure that's really dependent on the quality of its citizens. The second theme is the death of Socrates, like we talked about. It's an event that compels Plato to even consider, the limitations of the judgment of the people and who's the authority on morality. The third theme is distinction. So distinction between knowledge and opinion. So, the understanding of something and just the belief in knowing something. So these three kind of key themes weave throughout Plato's writings. Again, like I mentioned, for the purpose of today's episode, we're going to obviously try to survive first on Minecraft and go through some of these concepts. I think we'll go through some initial ones like kind of context of Athens, Socrates, and then hopefully we can build our base here and survive the night first. So to really accomplish the following themes, to really understand Plato, we kind of have to start with Plato at the beginning. So in Athens, in a democracy, that is in turmoil. And that's something that we'll go through in our second section here. So before we get into that, I want to kind of build an initial base here. Get a furnace going. And then we'll get into the next section here. Because last time did not work out well. Okay, so we'll maybe we'll go here. I want to build it before all the things come out. Yeah, we'll do that. This is definitely not symmetrical. That's fine. It's kind of just a base for now. Okay, I don't even have a... Okay, let me get this out. X. Okay. There. Okay. I don't really know what I'm making here, but I gotta build something for now. What I'm thinking of is kind of building a farm later. Crap. There we go. Just want to build this first and then we'll keep going. Because there were so many skeletons last time. Oh yeah, door could be there. There. Perfect. Okay. So, before Plato, was a philosopher, before there was dialogues, the Platonic dialogues, which we'll get into what those are, before the Republic, like I mentioned, we'll be going through, really before anything that he was famous for, Plato was born, as we all are. He was born in Athens around 427 BC. Maybe a few years earlier, maybe a few years later. Oh, crap. Okay, hold on. We gotta lock in here. Only problem is we have no torches, so that's gonna be okay. All right. See, this is why you need to build a base, or it's not gonna be good. It's good, good. Good. And then yeah, we do. I'm probably thinking also maybe we start digging, because we can build some stuff. Let me do that. There we go. Perfect. Okay. We're good to go. So, hopefully we can find some coal. That would be ideal. So, to kind of go back to Plato, he's born around 427 BC, and he dies around 328 BC. Plato's life spans, one of the most turbulent times in Athenian history. He's born in a city that's powerful, it's confident, it's culturally dominant, but he grows old watching it fracture in panic and really a shell of its former self. When Plato is born, Athens is at the height of its power. It's wealthy, it's confident, it sees itself as, exceptional. And this is Athens at the time that had just defeated the Persian Empire. And, the Persian Empire at the time, we're not going to go into all the history behind it, but it was very massive. And Athens coming out on top gave it a lot of prestige and really became a cultural center of the Greek world. So this means art, drama, architecture, philosophy, all of it really flourishes there. This is Athens who produces Sophocles, Euripides, and Athens where public debate is constant. It's encouraged. A city that really believes deeply in itself, but unfortunately, that confidence doesn't last. So Plato, oh wow, we went down. Plato grows up during the Peloponnesian War. So this is a long conflict between Athens and Sparta, and Plato lived through the entirety of it. It's generally considered like a single decades-long conflict with really two main phases. The war, lasted about 431 BCE till 404 BCE, and Plato was born near the beginning of the war. And he reaches adulthood around the time that Athens actually is defeated by Sparta. Now, this war, the defeat, and really just the entirety of it, it doesn't just drain Athens militarily, but also psychologically. Resources disappear. There are plagues. People die in massive numbers. Oh, we found a cave. Nice. One of the most famous examples is Pericles. So he's a head Greek statesman for Athens, and he dies about 2 years into the war. Plagues are pretty bad. Oh god. Is there a cave here? Maybe the sun has come up. Let's see. Okay, wait. Now I don't know. Where was I? Was it here? Oh, yeah, it was. Oh, it's because this is disjointed. Whatever. Let's do that. So there are food shortages because of the war. There's trust that erodes with the people. Political factions are kind of in turmoil. Athens, starts to panic. They make decisions, don't really lead well. Leaders rise and fall. Some are competent, some are reckless. And really, at several points during Plato's lifetime, Athens, oh God. Are you kidding me? Hold on. Oh my Lord. 2 creepers, bro? You're kidding me. Okay. Like, seriously, dude? 2? Oh my God. Okay, wait. There we go. Okay. So, Athens loses faith in its own democratic system, and it temporarily hands power over to oligarchs. So, the most prominent instance of this was the rule of the 30 tyrants. So this was around 404 BCE, and they were really a brutal regime. They were established by the support of Sparta after Athens is defeated in the war. The 30 actually, oh gosh, oh my Lord, oh God. We're going back in. Close this up. So the 30 actually only rule for less than a year, but they're really known for their violence and really abolishing a lot of the democratic institutions. Interestingly enough, a man named Critias was Plato's uncle. Plato was related to several prominent Athenian aristocrats, and Critias was actually involved in the 30 tyrants, who were installed obviously by Sparta. So Sparta supported the oligarchy as a way of kind of weakening the Athenian democracy. So they, tried to maintain control through those measures. Critias was one of the most violent figures within the regime of the 30. So ancient sources kind of call him as ruthless. He really committed to maintaining the oligarchy, responsible for executions, for, property seizures, political purges. Can I use this? And his rule intensified fear and instability in Athens. Critias, funny enough, was not only his uncle, but he was also a former associate of Socrates. So Critias actually had participated in Socrates' circles earlier in life. So this kind of complicated perceptions, obviously, during Socrates' trial. And Plato really witnessed these events as a young man. So you can see how this can be really conflicting for him, and his idea of a city-state, of how to govern it. So it really explains a great deal of why so much of political thought was put into this by Plato. Plato was deeply skeptical of rule that was grounded in faction and wealth and popularity or force. And it really becomes personal, obviously, for Plato. When Plato's looking at Athens, right, he's not looking at a golden age. Why is this guy still alive? There we go. Okay. He's looking at a civilization that was once believed that it knew what it was doing, and then it discovered it didn't. And that long arc really shapes everything Plato writes. And really, that's why he's so obsessed with education, why he's really suspicious of rhetoric, which is something we'll talk about more in the next sections. And he's really worried about how opinion kind of masquerades knowledge. So like being really good at speaking, but like you're not factually correct. So he's reacting to kind of like a pattern here, a pattern that unfolds over decades. And, Plato wasn't an outsider. He wasn't a slave. He, compared to Epictetus, who, he was a Roman philosopher. Now, one thing I just want to double check. I want to look at my notes just to make sure we're on the right track here. Because what we'll do here is, we'll talk about Plato the person, and then we'll get into more. Yeah, we're on the right track, so we're good to go. So, the keynote is that Plato wasn't excluded from public life. He came from an aristocratic Athenian family. This meant he had wealth, he had reputation, he had political connections. And this kind of matters because, like, Plato's not coming from, a place of resentment from below, from poverty, or criticizing a system he never really had access to. He's really criticizing something that he had full clarity on. And as a young man, Plato would have been educated the way Greek elites, so boys, were educated. Now, school back then wasn't, school in the modern sense. There weren't like classrooms or curriculum or exams in that sense. Those turtles? Oh yeah, they are. That's awesome. Education was more about formation, forming really shaping a certain kind of citizen. So this meant, and one of the core pillars of that education, of shaping, was poetry. So, nowadays we look at poetry as more something optional, or kind of, we see it kind of like movies, or like just kind of reading books or something like that. But back then, poetry was a moral instruction. So if you wanted to learn how to be the ideal citizen, you needed to read poetry. So if we look at Homer's The Odyssey, which there's a movie coming out this year with Matt Damon, Robert Pattinson, that's one of the many stories. Oh, there's a cave here. Oh God, this really goes down. Is that it? That is a skeleton. Do we go down there? Okay, well, if we're going down there, we need a sword. So what we could do is actually have like a little path here. So, to kind of go back to it, these weren't just kind of stories, you tell it, like a bonfire or something. These stories taught courage, honor, loyalty, pride, restraint. It showed what failure looked like, what the gods, what they rewarded, what they punished. So if you really wanted to understand how to live, you learned it through poetry. So, Plato would have grown up memorizing and studying Homer and many others. And these works really shaped how the Greeks understood the world, how they understood the gods and themselves. Now, Plato, he didn't just study poetry, he wrote it as well. So we're told as a young man, he wrote poems pretty seriously. He was very committed to it. Well enough that he could have, pursued that as a career. But that part is important because he talks about poetry in the Republic, and it's something that we'll talk about later on because he has very interesting opinions on it. But the other pillar of his was gymnastics. So gymnastics wasn't what we, call gymnastics now, like the Olympics or just kind of working out. Gymnastics was about discipline. It was about control, about endurance, and really about harmony. And the harmony is between the body and the character. So the Greeks, they didn't separate physical and moral excellence the way we maybe tend to. So what that meant is, like, if you looked strong, like if you kind of were ripped, to the Greeks, that meant you had a well-ordered soul. It was kind of evidence of it. Is that it? Why do I hear a skeleton? Are you kidding me? Oh my God. You are choking me. Dude, why are you in the house? Oh my God. Okay, there we go. Okay, we need torches, man. Oh my God. Okay. We need a sword. We need... All right, so let's just get everything. This. So to kind of go back to it, Plato was trained physically. It's known that he excelled at it. He did a lot of wrestling. And we know that his name Plato probably wasn't actually his given name. There's a few theories of where it comes from, but most common one is Plato means broad. So this could be broad-shouldered, broad-chested. He was physically imposing. That's kind of like the nickname they gave him. So he must have obviously been in shape. This is important because, as kind of small as it is, it gives us a good representation of who he was. He wasn't this like frail philosopher who was banished from the public, as other philosophers are. He wasn't withdrawn from the world or timid. He was physically present. He was athletic. He was capable, which means, when he later turns towards philosophy, it's not because he failed at everything else. It's because there was something there that captured him more deeply. And that something was Socrates. But before we get into Socrates and all that, there is an important part to kind of underline. So Plato didn't grow up intending to be a philosopher. So, and let me just get an axe. Okay, well, 2 axes is not bad. Do we have food? Oh, we're out of food. That's not good. Huh, okay. We have no torches. So, not ideal. Are there any animals nearby? How fast are these? Okay. Come on. Okay. There we go. Oh gosh. Nope. We're not going that way. I feel like there's supposed to be water zombies. But anyway, what I was trying to say is Plato didn't grow up intending to be a philosopher. So, in his world, philosophy wasn't really a career path. So it wasn't really like prestigious in that sense compared to some other roles. It wasn't lucrative. It wasn't really practical. So if you were, educated as an aristocrat like him, the expected path was public life. So it could be politics, military service, civic leadership. Philosophy was kind of seen as something that, you do when you're younger. You do it a bit, you do it briefly, and then you kind of move on to to real responsibilities. So Plato's, turn towards philosophy isn't really natural in his path, at least what is expected of him. It kind of helps us understand that it wasn't something that he inherited, that he was supposed to do. He really walked a separate path, and it came at a cost. So this is where the key idea for this section really, I would say, comes into focus. Plato wasn't really like born a philosopher or a thinker. He became one. And this was through the exposure, like we talked about, through conflict, through disappointment, through witnessing things that just didn't add up for him. Okay, there's a spider there. He starts with poetry, and then he later criticizes it, which we'll talk about later on. Oh God. Okay, we're not. Yeah, we're not testing this. We're not trying to die here. So, is there light down here? No. I'm really trying to get to some type of cave. So, he starts inside aristocracy as a rich man. What is this? Rock copper. He starts inside democracy, aristocracy, and he sees kind of the fragile pillars holding it together. When we read Plato later on in future videos, when he's talking about education, about virtue, leadership. Oh, crap. Okay, well then that means, because there's the water. Right. He's not really, what I'm trying to say, he's not really criticizing it from the sidelines. He's really lived through a lot of these things. And we're listening to someone who grew up immersed in culture. Is that iron? What is that? Yeah, raw iron. He grew up in the culture of Athens and slowly becomes convinced that something is really fundamentally wrong with how people are being shaped in society. He watches people trained to speak well through rhetoric, but not think clearly. Thinks about honor, chasing honor, the recognition of others. It's a big part that he talks about in his books. Not seeking wisdom. So the fact that Plato began as a poet makes this even more important, because it means his later suspicions, which is, there we go, Cole, thank God. His later suspicions of poetry, which he has in the Republic, his critiques of images, of appearance, of emotional persuasion, it isn't coming from, being ignorant of poetry or something like that. He knew how powerful stories can be. He knew how deeply they shaped belief. And he knew how easily beauty could, beauty of stories, of characterization of the heroes within it, can easily override truth. And, rather than abandoning that, poetry that is, he transforms it. And this is where we get into what the Platonic dialogues are. So instead of heroes, he gives us something different, which is quite unique from its time. He gives us conversations instead of myths. And all of that obviously will come later with what we'll talk about in the Platonic dialogues. But for right now, what matters is that he was really immersed in and really a fully formed product of Athenian culture. Whether it was poetry, whether it was the athletics, whether it was his status, the expectations of himself. Where was I? Oh yeah, up here. And really, regardless of all of that, philosophy really enters his life, like I said, with Socrates, which we'll talk about. And it really kind of changes everything for him, the trajectory of his life. and it will be a lifelong journey for him to the philosophical journey. So I think for right now, we're at 40 minutes. I think I'm going to stop here. I'm also tired because I filmed this for like 45 minutes, and then I realized I didn't film, and I was pissed. So we'll end here, I think. I think we're in a good place. Built our base here. I think for next episode, what we'll do is probably do some more mining. Perhaps try to find a new place to build a base. And the next section we'll go through is we will be going through Socrates. So we'll really get into who Socrates was, why he was important to Plato, really the turning point. Obviously his charges, he is executed by the Athenians, how this shattered kind of Plato's worldview. We'll talk about the charges themselves, and then we'll probably get into, I think we should have enough time, the Greek Enlightenment. This will give a bit more historical context into, the explosion of science, mathematics, rhetoric, art. Talk about some early thinkers, the pre-Socratics, what's new with rational explanations versus the myths that we talked about with, for example, Homer, the criticisms of tradition, and then lastly from there, Plato's tension with all of that. So I think for right now, I think we're at a good spot, guys. I really appreciate everybody watching if you've stuck around this long. I hope this has been insightful in a way that you can kind of watch this when you're just chilling out, kind of have something in the background, and you can kind of learn something new with Plato. And maybe in the future we'll do some Aristotle, some Friedrich Nietzsche, and maybe some other philosophers as well, and also their books. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you liked the video, like. If you have any thoughts, any comments you want to make, leave it in the comments. If you want to share it. But yeah, I'll see you in the next episode, guys. Stay tuned.